right, let's talk about the decisions that we make in a hypothesis test. At first, absolutely everyone thinks, because we've set up these two competing claims, that what a hypothesis test does is pick which one of those two is right. That is just dead wrong. That is not what we're doing here. Remember, we're assuming that null hypothesis is true. As we go through these calculations, I can't ever show that it's true. So I'll never be supporting the null. So it's not picking which one of them is right. Instead, what's really happening here is seeing if I have enough evidence. In other words, my mean is so far away from where it should be under the null, or my proportion is so far away from where it should be under the null, or whatever. I've got so much overwhelming evidence that I can reject that null hypothesis and accept the alternative. All right? Those are actually the same thing, right? If I reject the null and I say the null hypothesis is wrong, that must mean the alternative is correct. We're always measuring how much evidence I have in support of the alternative, which means against the null, right? These are equivalent things. So my two decisions are really, one, I did have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis and support the alternative. Those are the same. Or two, I didn't have enough evidence to support the alternative, and therefore I'll I guess that's really all I'm going to say. And we used to write in textbooks that we'll accept the null hypothesis is the other option. I either reject the null hypothesis and support the alternative, or I accept the null. Well, what they meant by accept meant, like, with all the baggage of it, like, I guess I'll begrudgingly accept this thing that I don't really want. It doesn't mean that I've shown the null hypothesis is true. I can't do that. And as I've talked about before, there's no even point in conducting a hypothesis test unless I've got evidence showing that the null is wrong. And in fact, that's the only evidence I have, is that sample. So basically, the only evidence I have is saying the null is wrong. I'm never going to be deciding that it is actually true. I'll just say, well, there's not enough evidence to actually show that it's wrong. So let me kind of just wrap up this idea here. We can only reject the null hypothesis. We will never support it. And we can only support the alternative, which means I can never reject it. In other words, I'll never be able to show the alternative is wrong. The only decision I could make is that I didn't have enough evidence to show that it was right. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And kind of again, getting back to a courtroom idea, when a jury finds someone not guilty after being presented with evidence of their guilt, right? What that not guilty thing means is there was not enough evidence to convict for guilt, right? It's a short phrase for something long, right? That doesn't mean they're innocent. We never find somebody innocent. We find them not guilty, which just means not enough evidence to say that they're guilty. That's going to be the exact same thing that we have here, right? So we're never going to be supporting that null. We're never going to be rejecting the alternative. Okay, so rejecting that null hypothesis is the same exact thing as supporting the alternative. Remember, they're contradictory claims. So these are equivalent things here. What I have in green, rejecting the null hypothesis, and supporting the alternative, are the same thing. It's two ways of saying the exact same thing. Failing to reject the null, which is really what we should be saying when there's just not enough evidence here, is the same thing as failing to support the alternative. These are our two choices that we will make. I either have enough evidence to support the alternative or I don't. These are the two decisions, not the null is right or the alternative is right. That's absolutely not what we're doing here.